The Lord. Welcome everybody to Lifestyles of the Rich in Faith Church, Lifestyles of the Rich in Faith Facebook now, SoundCloud, and Lifestyles Church YouTube channel. This is Kerwin and Brenda, and we thank you for joining us. We just want to share some things regarding the good lifestyle. So I'm going to dig right into it. This is our first time on Facebook. We want to welcome everybody on our Facebook page. And just for your scripture references, everything that I share is based on the Bible from my studies and times with the Lord. And I endeavor to convert that over here in an audio and video version to help share what the Lord has blessed me with. Okay, so this is called the Good Lifestyle series. So all I got is good news to share. So in Deuteronomy chapter 6, Brenda, she's my producer back there. Deuteronomy chapter 6, I'm going to read a few verses just to kind of open this up and warm me up a bit. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse, the first 3 verses. Now this is the commandment, and these are the statutes and judgments which the Lord your God has commanded to teach you, that you may observe them in the land which you are crossing over to possess, that you may fear the Lord your God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, you, your son, your grandson, and all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. Man, long life is a blessing from God. Therefore, hear, O Israel, and be careful to observe it, that it may be well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord God of your fathers has promised you, a land flowing with milk and honey. So a few things that I would like to share with everybody who's listening to me today. The word land there, I want you to think about the word, put in place of that life. Because what God is saying to these people is that his desire is to bring them into a place in their life, living and being, that is better where they are currently. Okay? That's number one. And eventually I'm going to show you over in the New Testament where Jesus actually was saying the same thing. A little different twist on words. But it clearly shows you here that the whole purpose of us being alive, having life, living, is to have such an experience that everything that we do, everything that we experience should be sweet, should be pleasurable, and should be good. Now, so now in the Bible, some of the words are, we don't really talk a lot of times like that in our 21st century language. But the word commandment is like, I simulate that, similar to the word principle. Statutes is our word laws. Okay, but God is saying that he's the originator of principles. He created them. He creates the laws. And the testimonies is another word for testimony is our word stories. You know, oftentimes, when I'm we're out, Brenda and I are out with another couple, we share each other's stories. I share stories about what's going on in my life currently, what happened in the past, and I remember that. And this is what God is telling these people when you read Deuteronomy chapter 6, remember what I've been doing. And sometimes when I share my personal stories of what I've been through, some things that have been hard and difficult, and how I came out of it, that's really God, what he has done for me. That's a testimony. And the Bible's called testimony, but that's my story. You have a story. And I think if you look and listen and think about the story of your life, where how you've been living, you should be able to see God involvement there, how he brought you through something difficult or brought you out. So, but the land called milk and honey, a lifestyle of goodness, is a special place. It's a place where your existence only is good all the time. It is possible. There are several scriptures that support that. Job chapter 36, verse 11, one of my favorite. It says that if you obey and serve him, you'll spend your days, this is every day now, days in prosperity, and years of pleasures. So I'm going to really break some practical things down and dissect it in such a way that I hope that you'll be able to grasp it for yourself and take a hold of it, and then be able to put these principles, what I call the work, in your life and experience it like immediately. I believe that everybody, if you listen and follow me carefully and think upon it, this will work in your life today, right now. Now, man, there's several different verses I can go. Now, I want to gradually move us over into the New Testament, a very popular chapter, Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. In that particular book, it's commonly referred to as part of the sermon that Jesus was teaching the people on the Mount. But I want to show you something here in Matthew chapter 6. We're going to read Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. And Jesus has said, don't lay up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Now, I'm coming right in the middle of what he's been teaching earlier, but I'm going to explain what I'm looking for here. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Now, I want you to keep in mind, the first scriptures I read was over in Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. Now, some of you who are a little bit moving fast mentally, I want you to kind of slow down, because I'm going to repeat a lot of things over, because one of the ways to really center down and people learn things is you repetitions. You got to learn to go over things that you think you know in order to grasp it, really grasp it. When I say grasp it, where you're living it, you're living the experience. It's no longer just words on a page, but now you take these words, incorporate them in your lifestyle, and you experience it. That's when you really got it. Other than that, it's just sort of an idea. Okay, so I have learned that we have to physically, mentally, emotionally, you got to kind of pull back and slow down to find out and discover really what God is saying to all of us. Now, verse 21, Matthew chapter 6, verse 21, Jesus is talking. He says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Then he says, now the lamp of the body is the eye. Now, if therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad or evil, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now, one of the first things that is so very important is to know this, is that the eye cannot see what your mind does not believe or know. Our eyes cannot see what our minds don't know or believe. This is what Jesus is talking about. Now, I'm going to break this into like a law. A law. It's called the law of change. Now, if we can change our mind, we can change everything in our lives for better or for worse. Now, without a change of the mindset, vision has no value. Now, of course, people, and particularly religious and Christian people, know the proverb about without a vision, people perish. But even if you have a vision and you can see in your mind what you think you want, if you're not thinking correctly, it'll just be an idea. See, people, and Jesus often said this, he says, to his disciples, they were seeing things that people desired to see, but they didn't see them. And one reason why they couldn't see him, even though they had physical eyes, one reason why they couldn't hear what Jesus was saying is because they weren't willing to change how they think. So in this law I call it the law of change, the only way anything will ever get better for you and I is we have to change how we think. We have to change your mindset. Now, sometimes people experience things in life that are good and they don't know really why that happened. It's sort of like a rolling of the dice. But unless you enter into what I call this good lifestyle way of living, then it'll always be, your life could always be sort of a hit and miss kind of thing. You won't have the precision of living that God talked about in Deuteronomy chapter 26. Did you know God promised these people nothing but goodness? Deuteronomy chapter 6, 7, 8, Deuteronomy chapter 28, all that stuff was just good, 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 good. Now, he did tell them that it was up to them to do certain things. Now, if they didn't do it, there was another side of life that they would experience, which was the bad part of life. Okay? But everything that God said in the book of Deuteronomy and many of the other first 5 books of the Bible, he guaranteed them. It was a guarantee that if they followed certain principles, if they did specific things, see, I call that a law of precision, then they could expect and anticipate only goodness and blessing come. But the problem was, and they had seen many miracles coming out of Egypt. The problem was, like it is today, is that we don't want to change how we think. So what I realized, that without a change of the mindset, vision has no value. Pretty much nothing else has any value. Now, we are what we think about the most. That's what you are. The Bible says in Proverbs, as a person thinks, so are they. So our thinking is a vital part about it. You become what you believe about yourself and others. You become what you believe and what you do the most. Okay? Now, I'm talking about that. I call this one area that I'm focusing on now, and this is a part of the good lifestyle secret, is this law of change. Having a willingness to be able to change how you think even when you don't want to. Even thinking that maybe what you think you know is correct could be actually wrong. How would you know the difference? Is what you're thinking about something or what you believe about something is actually right or wrong? Now, according to, and this is how I believe, I don't believe there's middle ground when it comes to right and wrong. I just taught a whole series on I call it the Two Kingdoms series. And clearly God says there's only right, there's only wrong. There's only truth and there's only untruth. There's good and there's evil. There's heaven and there's hell. There is no middle ground. Now, I want to take you back here to Matthew chapter 6, and I'm going to show you what Jesus said. Verse 22, he says, now the lamp, or in another translation, it says the eye the eye is the light of the body. If your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. So you see, he's talking about the eyesight, but the eye will not see what your mind does not know. So he's really talking about our mindset here. Are you following? Okay, let me show you this. Let's look at verse 23. Or I'm going to read this for those of you that don't have a Bible handy. Matthew chapter 6, verse 23. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? All right, so now he's talking about a mindset that's actually evil. Now look at verse 24. No one can serve how many masters? 2 masters. See, there's only 2 ways in life. One is the right way and one is the wrong way. The way you know And in this chapter, Jesus explains it. Actually, the following chapter, Matthew chapter 7, he tells you the way you know when something is right or wrong is by what? The results, the outcome. What is the end result of a product that you purchase? Do you get what you want from it? Do you get more pain from what you know or what you purchase? Does it produce death, destruction? Then that's evil. If it produced blessing, construction, building you up, that's good. So the two masters here, he's talking about having a mindset, people choosing to have a certain mindset toward the good or the evil. Now, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve, listen to this, you cannot serve God and mammon. Now, Jesus goes on to explain what he meant about serving God and mammon. The way, okay, now, particularly, I know church people are going to have a problem with this, but listen, serving God is not really what you think. Religious people think serving God is going to church, reading the Bible, and the religious activities. But that's really not true serving God. Remember, there's a story in the Bible where Jesus met this woman. Actually, she wasn't even part of the regular Jewish group, even though the Samaritans were a type of Jew. They looked at Jacob as part of their father too, even though they were considered outcast Jews. But Jesus met this woman at the well, and they go into this whole dissertation about this well was started by Jacob, and it was special and everything, and so forth and so on. And then she started talking about this mountain where they worship, this specific place. Well, Jesus he says, listen, it don't matter if you're in this mountain. Listen, God ain't looking at what mountain you go to worship him. He's looking at, he said, those that truly worship him, even God himself is looking for the real folks who worship him in spirit and truth. In other words, it's more about you as a person, your being, how you think, how you act. That's worshiping God, not all the other stuff. Okay, now you can do the other stuff, but unless it's producing this good lifestyle that I'm talking about, it don't mean nothing. It don't mean nothing. That's just something men come up with. Okay, now remember Jesus said you need to be aware of men, actually. Now, verse 25, Matthew chapter 6, he says, therefore means because of this, in other words, because of these two masters, two mindsets, the good and the evil, I say to you, do not worry about what your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on it. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the field. So as you read this story here, Jesus is talking about what most people or a lot of people think about every day. We all think about our daily needs. Okay, but the problem is how you think about them. We think about them typically in terms of worry, anxious, stressful, or it's a problem. That's what he's talking about. Now, that's why I said the law of change, unless your mindset shifts, life won't get better. It actually gets worse. Because, see, there is no middle ground. No one, listen to this, no one of us stands still in life. Nothing is standing still. You know, as Brent and I were putting together all this recording equipment, the iPhones, the cameras, I got a recorder going, and the sun is continually moving. Everything is moving. Okay, so nothing doesn't stop is what I'm trying to say. So my point is this, you and I have been given an ability called decision making. So we decide if we're going to choose to be better or choose to be worse, choose to be good or choose to be bad. That's actually a gift from God, actually. It's your decision, yours and my decision. Now, the second law that I'm going to interject to you is called the law of correction. I refer to it as the law of correction. Making small daily routine adjustments in life will produce large returns in life through the years. Okay, so a lot of times, most people think they got to make these like radical changes. Typically, now there are exceptions to change, all right? But as a rule, for many of us, even myself, it's just making an adjustment. See, like, for example, sometimes, you know, we're trying to get somewhere. And I live out here in Southern California, and we have a lot of freeways. And in Los Angeles, particularly the freeways, most of them are generally crowded. But did you know there's certain lanes on the freeway that go faster than others? Okay, if you're trying to get somewhere. So what you have to do is what? Not necessarily take another freeway, but just change lanes. So that's a simple analogy that I'm trying to use as far as making an adjustment. So in your thinking, in your mindset, how you look at life, look at yourself, look at others, look at your bank account, look at your job, look at you. You gotta adjust that view. That will help your thinking come up. When I say rise above, because God is always on the up and up. In other words, typically, all through the years that I've known about God for myself, he's generally never down. He's always wanting to bring me higher. Okay? He wants me to have more. He wants me to have more, not just for the sake of having more, but he wants me to be able to become more in order to be better at me. Okay? See, you can't really handle more stuff unless you become a better being. People who want to be millionaires, for example, I know what that's like. Okay, multimillionaires require a great deal of personal development. Okay? You can get a lot of money and lose it the next few days or so because you don't really know what you don't have the capacity within how you are as a person and the mindset to be able to manage it all. People who win the lottery, and this is not putting people down, this is just an analogy. Most people who win the lottery, you never hear the stories afterwards, after about 2 or 3 years, have lost it all or given it all away. Okay, because everybody comes after them, and they themselves aren't equipped as a being to be able to manage it all. In other words, they can't say no, for example. No. No to themselves, no to others. No, because they think they're not what? Walking in love. I know Christian people like that. So this is called the law of correction. Now, a few other things I'd like to interject. I'm going to read Matthew chapter 6 again as my reference, because there's a lot in here when you put it in 21st century understanding that is ageless. Okay, Matthew chapter 6 again. So verse 26. Now Jesus again, he says, look at the birds of the air. I love to watch birds. They seem to be so careless and free and no responsibility, right? No bills, nothing prowling to deal with, other than maybe being eaten up by another bird. Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? So you see where Jesus is putting the emphasis on self-value. People don't really value themselves very much. You don't. You and I mean, I know it's hard, but because we're brought up in a world usually where people, even your own family, don't celebrate you as being special. Oh, that's just Kerwin. He's just a brother, or he's just a cousin, or he's just an uncle. That ain't nobody. And I've been guilty of doing the same thing. So when there's a lack of self-value, then you tend to think about yourself as being not that important. And that's what I mean about changing your mindset. See, you have to become more appreciative of yourself, before the good things in life become more appealing and attractive to you. It just don't happen. You're not going to make a lot of money without you being a very rich person inside. I'm going to tell you that right now. Most people who I have met usually are afraid of a lot of money. When I say afraid of a lot of money, when you see something very expensive, it usually will frighten most people because they can't afford it. That's the first thing they think about. Something that's very expensive. Now, I'm not saying to do something you can't do, but my point is many people won't even look at something beautiful because they convince themselves, they talk themselves out of it so much that they will never, ever be able to acquire it, that they can't afford it. You see what I mean? See, that's a mindset that you chose. We ain't talking about buying it. We just said, look at it. But why? Well, because so you see how the mind, you trick yourself? There's people who won't go on certain streets right here in LA, Beverly Hills, for example, Rodale Drive. Why? Because they say there's nothing that they can buy. But did you know they have millions of tourists constantly running up and down that street? They don't all buy, but they're fascinated with the beauty and the luxury that's on the street. So those are some kind of practices that help you think better about yourself. Okay? Because like I said, the land flowing with milk and honey does include having better, having good, and being good. It's all inclusive. It really is. But it does take a certain type of person to experience it. God himself said it. Now watch this here. I got a few more things. Matthew chapter 6, verse 27. Which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to a statue? So here you go. When you worry, he's not saying don't tend to your responsibilities. But when you tend to problems and responsibilities, fretting over them as though you can't do nothing or it's going to get worse doesn't help the situation, in other words. You have to start looking at problems as potential solutions and making you a better person instead. Okay? That's one of the things that successful people do. Everybody on earth experience problems and have challenges, we call them problems. But what separates the ones from the successful over the problems than the ones that succumb to the problems is usually different in the way they think about it. Okay? The way they think about a problem. They don't think of a problem as being hopeless. We can't do nothing. Typically, when you think like that, you pretty much won't be able to do nothing and you're going to fail, or that's typically what happens. The successful don't think like that. They typically never give up. Never. There's always a solution. If they can't go this way, then they find another route to go. But they get to where they're trying to get to. Okay? That's what I'm talking about in this law of correction. Now, Matthew chapter 6. I can keep going. Let's go to verse... now watch this at verse 28. You didn't know all this was in the scriptures, did you? See, okay, Matthew chapter 6, verse 28. So why do you worry? Now see, there's a question here. So Jesus just said, so why do you worry about clothing when you see worrying doesn't solve the problem? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I say to you that, now look at this, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Now, why would Jesus say that? When Solomon is considered, well, at least during this time, one of the wealthiest, actually one of the wealthiest financially men who's ever walked the earth. Okay, but yet he's saying not even Solomon was made rich this way. Actually, when you study David, his father, he did come into sort of an inheritance of wealth. That King David had put aside a lot of the wealth over his lifetime, passing it down to his son. So it was an inherited wealth that was given to him. That's what but what Jesus is saying, look, there is a wealthness and richness that far exceeds that. Okay? Now, I got to give you some ways on how you tap into it before we go. Okay, he said here in verse 30, now if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of what? Little faith. Now, my online church is called Lifestyles of the Rich in Faith. And the reason why we call it that is because my desire is always to be more rich in faith than anything else, but not faith the way it's been traditionally taught. I'm not one of these faith teachers that says, don't go to the doctor, don't pay attention to how you feel, don't look at what it looks like. I'm just the opposite. You need to pay attention how you feel, your body. You need to go see a doctor, a good one who can help you. Take medication if it's going to help you feel better. I'm the opposite. I think it takes faith for all of that. Pay attention. Don't ignore the problem. Okay? If the weeds are in the garden, they are not going away by you talking to the weeds to go. You're going to have to get down in there with your hands and pull them out, or pay somebody to pull them out. Okay. That's how they're going. All right. Now, I got to close, but I'm going to give you some food for thought about faith. Notice Jesus said, "Oh, you of little faith." So in all of this dissertation, it had to do with what you and I believe. That's all faith is. Everybody, even a person who says they don't believe in God, don't believe the Bible, agnostic, atheist, they all have belief systems. They do have a mindset of something that they believe, and that's their faith. Now, this kind of faith in what God is saying in this book here, it has to be in 3 locations in order for it to be effective in your life and my life. Now, number 1, and I'm not talking about it in the location that most of you think it is, or what's mostly taught, like particularly sand.